Hey everybody, welcome back to Political Science 101 at Simmons College. Sorry the video is late once again. I want to thank those of you who have submitted your quiz. Most of you have. I've graded some of them. They look good so far, but I haven't entered the grades onto Canvas, so I'll get that done probably tomorrow. But either way, before the next class lecture, I'll have the ones that you submitted on time graded. You can still submit those. I take a few points off, but it's no big deal. It's important you get it. If you get a 0 for not submitting it, that'll make a huge hit on your grade. It would be like an entire letter grade difference. A to a B, B to a C, and so on. But if you get it in late, just a few points off, it won't affect your overall grade that much. Not that much. Please hurry up and get them in. And if you have questions about it, reach out to me over text message or email, although I'm always most responsive over text. But any way you reach out to me, I'll do my best to get back to you in a timely manner. That being said, I hope everyone's having a good, safe week. I know you've got some weird weather fluctuations going on there in Louisville, but hope everyone's doing okay. I want to talk about the next couple of weeks of class. As it says in the supplement to the syllabus, we are going to talk about this Republican form of government. Now, the wording gets a little confusing, but it's not hard to understand. We have a Republican Party and a Democratic Party. Similar root words, different meaning. When I say we have we live in a republic. That means a representative democracy with a legislative body elected by the people. The people delegate the powers of government to the legislature, to Congress. That's a republic or Republican form of government, not to be confused with a Republican government, meaning one in which the Republican Party controls the government, as it did. Let's see, I know it did most recently from January of 2017 through January of 2019. There were 2 years where Republicans controlled the White House with Donald Trump, controlled the House of Representatives and the Senate. But then 2018 elections, they lost the House of Representatives to the Democratic Party. But again, not to be confused with a republic, which is a type of government, which is the type that it's close to the type that we have. You're going to hear people talk about democracy. They talk about the United States government. It's not a true democracy. A true democracy means every citizen gets a direct say in government. It's never really happened on a large scale. People who don't know too much history will tell you that ancient Greece had democracies. Places like Athens and Sparta were ruled by a majority vote of the people. I mean, yeah, I guess eligible voters had a say in it, but had a direct say in government. Instead of voters electing members of Congress and a president who then make all the decisions, in a Greek democracy, the individual citizens would come together and vote. Sort of. At the height of its power and influence, the Greek city-state of Athens, which is still a city today, but a couple thousand years ago, it was I should say, a little over 2,000 years ago, it was a very powerful and influential city-state. It was a little country, almost, in of itself. It had 250,000 people living in it, only 40,000 eligible voters. And all 40,000 of them had a right to come together and vote on all government matters. It's not practical for two reasons. Number one, 40,000 people is too many people to try to get them to agree on anything meaningful. But number two, and the most important reason, is that there were like 190,000 people that were left without a say in government. Some of them maybe were children. Some of them maybe were slaves. Does that seem right to you? That many people being left out of decision making, being denied the right to influence the government? Because of course the government was making decisions that influenced them. in their daily lives, but then they weren't able to actually be a part of that. That is a moral problem, an ethical problem, and it's a practical issue, because you have that many people who are disenfranchised from having a vote, and sooner or later, their frustration with government will boil over, and they will cause problems for the government, and rightfully so. All right. Quick review on 3 branches of government, just like we did before your first quiz. The federal government and state governments in the United States have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. Each branch has the ability to check the other, what high school history teacher, what high school social studies teachers love to call checks and balances. The Congress is sort of elected by the people. I'm sorry. Let me back up. The president is sort of elected by the people. The president has control over the armed services, the military, subject to a budget, a spending budget set by Congress. Congress elected by the people, disproportionately, because as we've discussed in this class, Kentucky, with its 4.4 million people, has 2 senators. Montana has less than 1 million people and also has 2 senators. California has many, many, many times over the number of people as Kentucky or Montana, and they have 2 senators. So Congress is disproportionately elected, because of the Senate, disproportionately elected to pass a budget that has a lot to do with what the president can and can't do, and Congress also passes other laws that direct the executive branch on things that they must do. And of course, both the president and the Senate install federal judges who then have the ability to overturn acts of Congress or acts of the executive branch if they find them to be unconstitutional. Those are your branches of government. What we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks there are issues related to what government can and can't do, what the United States government, what the federal government, states, and local governments can and cannot do for us, the people who live under the jurisdiction of those different levels of government. This will tie in nicely to the last part of the semester, where we'll talk about civil rights in the United States, individual liberties, and the Constitution. What the government can and cannot do for you is governed by the Constitution. The federal Constitution is the ultimate law in the United States. State constitutions are the ultimate law in a state, unless they violate the federal Constitution. So what's in those constitutions? Well, one very important piece of the United States Constitution is the 14th Amendment. So the Constitution is passed when the country came into being, and it has articles. Article 1, Congress. There's an article for the President. There's an article describing the powers of the judicial branch. And then there are amendments passed later on. The 14th Amendment is an incredibly important one that was passed in the wake of the Civil War and as part of the abolition of slavery. And part of the 14th Amendment says that all people have equal protection under the laws. Now, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that phrase, equal protection, that is in the 14th Amendment. What does it mean? Well, it means that the laws have to treat everyone equally. And that the federal Constitution, in the 14th Amendment, says that state and local governments cannot treat different types of people in different ways. Is that the way it always happens in reality? No, of course not. Different people do get different treatment under the law. that the level of severity of that different treatment under the law has changed over the years, but it's still a big problem. So one thing the federal government can do for its people is use the federal court system to enforce the 14th Amendment and say, okay, state governments, you're treating some people differently than others, and that's not okay. What do I mean by that? We'll talk about more specific examples next time. Most of the rest of this class is going to be about the Constitution and how it applies to people living in the United States, citizens, but also non-citizens, to everyone who falls under the jurisdiction of the United States. In 2016, Donald Trump ran for president on a campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." I'm not here as a professor to tell you how you should or shouldn't vote, and I won't make overtly political statements. What I can do is use factual information about the history of the United States and apply it to political situations. When a politician says they want to make America great again, that phrase, just using plain English, implies that America was once great. Now we have to define greatness to know what on earth that means. It means different things to different people. I have said since I began teaching this class at Simmons, I've said to students that you'd be hard-pressed to show me a time when the United States was great, as I interpret that word to mean excellent, to mean, and I don't have a dictionary in front of me, but I think of it as excellent, as almost perfect, as for a country, for a nation to be great, it would need to follow its own laws first and foremost. Laws like the Constitution and the 14th Amendment. But even before the 14th Amendment was passed, there's a reason that that law was needed. It was necessary because different levels of government were treating, and they still do, by the way, but they were treating different types of people differently. An American descendant of slaves, or in the 1860s, an actual slave, is a human being, just like my white European ancestors were human beings. We're the same species. We are people. But a white person living in the United States was treated very differently than a black person, and certainly very, very differently than a slave. So when was America great exactly? Was it great when our laws, both federal and state and local laws, allowed the purchasing and selling, buying and selling of human beings as chattel slaves? Was it great when only only white property-owning men 21 years and older could vote? Did it become great when they lowered the voting age to 18? Was it great when women could not vote? Because that's a lot of our history, that women didn't have the right to vote. That was just the 20th century. Remember, the country came into existence in the late 18th century, the 1700s. The entire 19th century, the 1800s, women could not vote. Was it great when descendants of slaves and women legally had the right to vote, but they had trouble accessing the polls? they would try to go vote, and armed white men would stop them from doing so? Was it great when we used literacy tests to exclude former slaves from voting and their descendants? How about, I can keep going, but how about when peaceful black protesters in the 1960s were attacked by police dogs and turned firemen's hoses on them to disperse crowds? Was it great when federal government officials called violent white protesters and peaceful black demonstrators rioters? Because that was just like last year. All this stuff didn't happen 200 years ago. A lot of it happened last year. It's happening now. When was America great exactly? We have some of the pieces in our Constitution that could be the building blocks for a great nation, for a great country of people. A country that doesn't require anyone to be a certain religion, but still can follow the example of Jesus Christ to love the sick and the poor and the hungry, to clothe the naked, house the homeless. The pieces are there, and we'll talk about those pieces, but we have to follow them, and our court system has to uphold them, and our Congress and President have to strengthen the pieces that are in place to make this country a better place for everyone in it. Talk about that stuff next week. Like I said, I'll have your quiz grades to you pretty soon. If you haven't submitted the quiz yet, please, please, please do. Get a few points off, but you can still make a really good grade for this semester if you get me this quiz. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you're having a good week. I'll talk to you all soon.